July 14, 2024, at the Golden State. It was a seemingly serene summer evening at the Golden State, nestled quietly in the heart of Springfield. The soft hum of the air conditioning blended with the distant murmur of patrons enjoying their evening meals, creating an atmosphere of calm and contentment. Guests leisurely wandered through the lobby, oblivious to the storm that was about to descend upon them. But little did they know, the tranquility of the night was about to be shattered by a figure who, by all accounts, was determined to make the world revolve around her at least for the next few hours. Enter Heather, self-proclaimed queen of room 212, a woman whose presence was as subtle as a tornado in a teacup. It wasn't enough for her that the world was running on its own terms. No, Heather had other plans. With the swagger of a diva making her grand entrance to an exclusive soiree, she stormed into the lobby, her eyes scanning the room with the calculated gaze of someone who firmly believed the universe should operate on her whims. That this wasn't a casual visit to check out or to ask for recommendations about the best local sites. No, Heather had come for something far more dramatic, a grand, unsolicited masterclass in chaos. She didn't just walk into the lobby, she made an entrance, as if the space was suddenly a stage and she, the star of the show. Her every movement was an exaggerated flourish, each step punctuated by a glare, each look aimed squarely at anyone who dared to exist in her orbit. As if by design, she moved like a force of nature, her presence unapologetically dominating the room. Patrons paused, mid-conversation, sensing the air shift. Heather was not here to blend in, no, she had arrived to disrupt. The golden-hued tranquility of the inn now felt a distant memory, replaced with the rising tension of an impending spectacle. And so it began, Heather's impromptu performance, where the only script was her own unfettered desire for attention and the only outcome, chaos. It was clear now, the night had taken a turn, and the Golden State Inn would never be the same again. Reports began to trickle in from bewildered guests, who couldn't make sense of what was happening at the Golden State Inn that afternoon. Heather, a guest with an unwavering belief in her personal power, was forcing people to stop and stare with her bizarre and disrespectful behavior. Not only was she openly shouting racist slurs, but she was acting as though the entire space existed for her own enjoyment. Heather was relentless in her criticism of everyone around her, condemning everything from the attitude of the staff to the hotel's menu, as though she were the supreme ruler of a kingdom where no one else had the right to challenge her. "I am the moral compass of this establishment," she declared grandly, as if she had been appointed to lead and correct the wrongs of everyone there. Heather's voice echoed through the hallway, drawing the attention of not only the other guests, but also the hotel staff, who paused their work to assess the situation. The way she spoke was reminiscent of a town crier in a small village, though, unfortunately, instead of delivering good news, she brought a series of negative and illogical proclamations. What made the situation even more strange and perplexing was Heather's actions as she, in the midst of proclaiming herself the voice of justice, began rummaging through leftover breakfast food. This was an utterly absurd act, as it was already nearly dinner time, and no one in the hotel expected to see Heather, self-proclaimed moral guy, picking at stale bread and cold scrambled eggs. It was the perfect blend of a sanctimonious critic and an uncouth eater, causing those around her to giggle at the absurdity of her actions. All of these behaviors not only caused confusion, but also raised feelings of discomfort, leaving other guests in the hotel worried about the security and respect they deserved. Lost in her own misguided beliefs, Heather had transformed the space into a stage for wild antics, disregarding any semblance of social norms. The hotel staff, witnessing Heather's increasingly dramatic outbursts, exchanged anxious and uncertain glances. They had seen their fair share of difficult guests, but nothing quite like this. Should they step in and attempt to defuse the situation, or would their intervention only provoke more chaos? One staff member nervously adjusted his tie, while another glanced over at the hotel manager, who appeared just as unsure of how to handle the unpredictable storm that was Heather. The atmosphere was tense, and the once quiet lobby now buzzed with an uneasy energy. Everyone waited for someone to make the first move, but no one seemed eager to get caught in Heather's escalating tirade. The breaking point finally came when Heather, clearly on the edge of a full-blown meltdown, turned her attention to an innocent bystander, a vending machine. With a dramatic flair befitting a Shakespearean villain, she began berating it with all the righteous indignation of someone who had just discovered that the world was, in fact, conspiring against her. "What kind of establishment," she scoffed, "stocks 3 types of chips and only 1 measly granola bar?" Her voice rose to a pitch that was both absurd and alarming, drawing the attention of every guest within earshot. By now, the entire lobby had paused, forming a semicircle of onlookers as Heather, red-faced and trembling with fury, stared down the machine as though it had personally wronged her. Her outrage was so intense that even the vending machine, silent, unmoving, and completely innocent, seemed to cower under the weight of her criticism. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure whether to laugh or feel embarrassed for the woman whose anger was so misplaced, yet so fervently expressed. The absurdity of the situation, combined with Heather's complete lack of self-awareness, made it impossible for anyone to look away. As Heather continued her tirade, making wild, almost comical accusations about the machine's snack bias, the crowd of hotel guests grew larger, some amused, others more perplexed than ever. Meanwhile, the staff stood frozen, caught between the impulse to intervene and the recognition that they were witnessing a rare and highly unpredictable performance, one that, by the looks of it, was far from over. When staff politely asked her to leave, Heather dismissed their pleas with a flourish. "Leave. I'm not disturbing anyone," she snapped, loudly slamming the vending machine door. "I'm enhancing their experience." At this point, exasperation won out over patience, and a call to the police was made. As they hung up, one staff member muttered, "This job didn't mention handling sovereigns of chaos in the description," while another added, "She's the queen of room 212, after all." And so began an evening that would go down in Golden State in lore as the night Heather met her reality check. As the 2 officers stepped out of their patrol car, a heavy sense of dread seemed to settle over them. Perhaps they were questioning their life choices or silently reflecting on what karmic debt they were repaying on this particular night. The scene before them did little to inspire confidence. Heather, the evening's unintentional protagonist, was dramatically clinging to the hotel's large neon sign, as though it were a lifeline, her posture reminiscent of a modern-day prophet awaiting divine intervention or a reality TV audition gone terribly wrong. "Ma'am," one officer began in a tone that combined exhaustion and forced diplomacy, "can we talk for a moment?" Heather, in what can only be described as peak theatrical defiance, turned her head sharply, her expression a mix of indignation and inert confidence. "Oh, absolutely not," she snapped, waving her hand dismissively as though swatting away an inferior argument. Without missing a beat, she launched into a full-blown rant about her sovereign rights, detailing her perceived entitlement to disrupt the evening of every unfortunate soul in her radius. "This is my hotel now," she declared, gesturing grandly toward the lobby. "I'm exercising my constitutional right to make everyone uncomfortable." The officers exchanged a brief glance, the kind of look that silently communicates, "This is going to take a while." When they politely but firmly instructed Heather to comply, the performance escalated. "I'm not resisting," she proclaimed with the conviction of someone trying to win an Oscar, all while sprinting a solid 5 feet away. To add flair to her escape, she threw herself toward a decorative plant, clutching it with the desperation of a soap opera heroine in her most tragic scene. The officers stood frozen for a moment, perhaps stunned by the sheer absurdity of the situation. One finally muttered under his breath, "Is she trying to camouflage with the foliage?" What should have been a straightforward request to leave the premises was rapidly spiraling into a bizarre comedy of errors. With Heather firmly at the center, determined to turn an ordinary police encounter into an epic saga of resistance and potted plant solidarity. Despite Heather continuing to kick, flail her arms, and mutter prayers, invoking divine justice, the officers remained persistent, applying control techniques that were firm but not excessively violent. The scene now resembled a wrestling match between heaven and hell, with the officers' patience and resilience being the deciding factors. Heather, with her undeniable performer nature, continued throwing out defiant remarks with a sense of smugness. "You're breaking my arms," even though both her arms were perfectly intact with no signs of injury. This dramatic statement only highlighted the stark contrast between her words and reality, as her arms remained strong and unharmed. The physical struggle, with its blend of futile resistance and Heather's exaggerated reactions, turned into a theatrical performance, mixing humor and absurdity. Each of Heather's actions, from praying to shouting, only highlighted the officers' exhaustion and perseverance as they tried to complete their tasks while maintaining calm. When Heather was finally placed in the patrol car, The two officers sighed in relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. They exchanged a glance, feeling the tension ease, but still somewhat bewildered by the chaotic storm they had just weathered. One of the officers turned to ask the other, "What charges are we pressing?" "Public disorder, trespassing, and obstruction of justice," the other replied, his voice heavy with the fatigue of dealing with Heather's annex. However, Heather, with her remarkable survival instinct and defiance, immediately heard and shouted from the back of the car, her voice rising as if she had uncovered a grand conspiracy against her. "Obstruction, I'm just expressing my personality," she yelled as though it was an undeniable truth that everyone should understand. Her words rang out, a declaration of war between her and the system she refused to accept. The irony and sarcasm in Heather's defense were impossible to ignore. She didn't realize that the personality she prided herself on was exactly what had led her to this situation. Because if her personality and disregarding rules and other people's rights, then perhaps the world needed to find a more orderly way to deal with such personalities. Though Heather's statement was illogical, one couldn't deny that she still clung to her fighting spirit. She continued to see herself as the victim in her own narrative, despite the fact that her actions had led an entire team of officers to be involved. Meanwhile, the officers, shaking their heads in helplessness, could only remain silent as they continued driving, reflecting on the difficult work of the day and a woman who seemed to have never learned the concept of listening in her life. The scene was unforgettable, with Heather continuing to shout slogans about her so-called personal freedom, while others bore the consequences of her arrogance. As the lights dimmed and the screen faded to black, a voice full of sarcasm echoed from behind the screen. "Remember, folks, actions always have consequences. And if you enjoy watching the tantrums of superior beings like this, don't look away, there's more to come." It truly was a night to remember at Golden State, where the chaos of one woman, seemingly a joke, turned into a comically absurd drama. And if you think only humans experience stress in situations like these, the vending machine in the corner of the room might need some psychological therapy after that night. Who knows, that machine might have witnessed everything from heated arguments about snack shortages to rambling from a special guest. Perhaps, in some parallel universe, the vending machine is now lounging on a couch, telling this story to other objects, looking utterly bewildered. The hotel may not have fully recovered from its refreshing experience, but one thing is certain: it will forever remember the night when someone who thought they were the center of the universe realized that sometimes the universe just doesn't care about individuals and that the world, whether humorous or serious, keeps moving forward. Heather's unexpected visit to Golden State may have ended in noise and chaos, but it also left an important lesson about humility and respecting those around us. Over-the-top actions, whether stemming from arrogance or belief in personal power, will eventually face consequences. Whether humorous or serious, every action has its reaction, and the world doesn't always revolve around individuals who think they are the center. The lesson Heather and all of us can take from this is that respect, humility, and the ability to understand the consequences of our actions are key to building lasting relationships and a harmonious society. And sometimes, in the most seemingly serious situations, we can find memorable moments that remind us that even the most ridiculous scenarios can become valuable lessons.